Look, if a plane's going very, very fast, okay, look, if a plane is going slowly, I can imagine how the effect of gravity can balance out and you don't actually know that you're following a curved surface. But if you're going really, really fast, I imagine there was a point where it would shoot off into the atmosphere and you would have to make a correction. You have to dip
so it went
down.
fast.
Yeah,
You're just underestimating.
But I'm not talking about the problem of lift. I'm talking about the escaping the physicality.
Well, if you look at the actual mathematics of how flight works, and you run the actual equations, and you read the papers beyond just like control Fing for motionless and stationary or whatever, flat and stationary, because every time that someone's posted one of those papers, I've actually read it. I've gone through the coordinate transformations, and it doesn't say what you think it says.
Why would it say that then? Why would it say what we're saying?
So you're what you're mistaking is a set of simplifying assumptions that can be made to models under certain circumstances. When you read the paper, they also say things like the plane is completely rigid, which is obviously also not true. These are simplifying assumptions that are made for modeling and back of the envelope calculations. In all practical applications of navigation, in inertial navigation, in many ways, you absolutely have to account for curvature and rotation. And the faster you go, the greater the effect is. So for inertial navigation systems for missiles, it becomes much, much greater, the effect that you have to account for.
Define rigid. Like I get
I'm posting, since you guys are on this topic, I'm posting about 8 or 10 of them right now. They should all come through in one thing. Yeah, if you guys want to save them or take a look at them.
So yeah, this first one, I've read this paper, dude. Doesn't say what you think it says. Again, like all you're doing here is just going through the paper and finding where it says, oh, NASA and motionless and stationary, but you don't actually read the paper and understand the mathematics and understand what it's used for. Nor can you claim to, because mathematics is actually kind of complicated. But
because when you test equipment on a spinning ball, you have to treat it as a stationary, non-rotating Earth, planar, flat.
So, certain circumstances, it helps the modeling to make simplifying assumptions where they're not required. In other applications, like inertial navigation systems, which is how planes, submarines, missiles, like we know about GPS, right? We could talk about that. Inertial navigation systems are required for modern aircraft to function. Okay? And those inertial systems absolutely have to account for curvature and rotation. And they're synced to the exact radius of the Earth and the rotational period as modeled by a pendulum. There's a pendulum model. It's not a physical pendulum, but that's how they make the mathematics work, called Fuller tuning, created in 1923. Discovered in 1923, inertial navigation systems are required for all modern airlines, submarines. They're used on ships, and they're especially used on missiles, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles, which can't rely on GPS because if they relied only on GPS, they'd be extremely vulnerable to jamming or destruction of the GPS network with anti-satellite weapons. So. And if you talk to any real commercial pilot that has a verified multi-engine rating from the appropriate agency, whether that's in Australia, United States, many other countries, you will find that they tell you that much. And they'll explain to you why those documents say it's just not a good argument. Actually, the Steelman, what you could argue is Etherwind, because at least that acknowledges the truth. I'll give you that one for free. Just say Etherwind, and ether flow across the flat Earth. That's a better explanation.
What?
Keep up, guys.
I mean,
Come on.
I wish I had time to get into it right now, but I mean, you realize that planes do not account for the tangential velocity gradient, right? They do not
So
adjust for that. They would have to.
yeah, what you're
It's that
saying,
easy.
what you're saying, is just completely contradicting the principles of inertial navigation. So you don't know what you're talking about.
It's not true. Talking about, okay, so regardless of the inertial navigation, you
Okay,
need to
regardless,
name the mechanism. Wait, listen. The plane only gets the conserved momentum from being on the ground, right? That's the conserved momentum. If it starts out at 500 mile per hour latitude, it only has that. You need to name the mechanism that accelerates the plane twice as fast sideways to be at 1,000 miles an hour, so it's in perfect sync with the runway at the equator, so it can treat the Earth as if it's stationary there. And even if you could name the mechanism, which you can't, regardless of your inertial navigation system, you have to name the force that pushes the plane twice as fast sideways. And how, even if you could, how does that plane continue rotating eastward sideways as it's landing in a perpendicular direction and coming to a stop? It debunks your ball, regardless of your navigation or your maths. It doesn't work. It wouldn't work. They would have to have jets on the side of the plane to keep the plane in perfect rotation with the eastward movement as it's landing, so the pilot can just assume to treat it as stationary the way left lane does.
So have you ever talked to a commercial pilot? I know that you've had people explain this to you in the chat. So why haven't you adapted to go off of what they've told you?
Because they cannot name the mechanism. The question I just asked you, name the mechanism. What's the force that pushes the plane twice as fast sideways? Name that. Then I'll talk to you more about it.
I've seen you post your little meme. I've seen people that know what they're talking about explain to you why it's incorrect, and you keep using it. Why is that?
No,
why would a commercial pilot
momentum.
think the Earth is flat?
No, they just say what they say is you don't understand conserved momentum. No, I gave you the conserved momentum. It's 500. You don't get more. That's all they say.
I said that. I've seen other people explain it to you better than I did specifically.
Okay, then explain it. Explain it to me. Tell me the mechanism that pushes the plane twice as fast sideways. If you can't name that, you're not explaining shit.
Well, the plane interacts with the atmosphere in complex ways according to the dynamics that are governed by the equations. You tend to post a simple.
Okay, wait, hold on. Is that your answer? Wait, hold on. Wait, is that your answer? Because the airplane interacts with the atmosphere in complex ways? Is that really your answer? Name the mechanism that pushes it perfectly sideways, twice as fast. Otherwise, you're useless to me.
Well, how does
undetectable by the plane or the pilot.
No, how does a plane wing create lift?
Air.
Yeah. So it's almost like it's flying. It's almost like it's being flown. It's not really flying. It's the atmosphere. So that's a pretty obvious point.
Well,
even if
what
you
do we call air? What do we call air? What do we call air? What do we call air that pushes the plane? A wind. Okay, so we have winds. Next.
Well, why isn't wind flying around the Earth at 1,000 miles an hour?
The winds go in all directions.
Why isn't the atmosphere just flying around the Earth at 1,000 miles an hour? So that's how fast the Earth is rotating, right?
Because there is no rotation. It is stationary. The only way I can compare stationary is if it's stationary. It is that simple.
Hey, Dave, keep it at a window, man. Keep your phone at a window.
So you can just hand wave dismiss the requirement of inertial navigation to account for the curvature and precise rotational period of the Earth all you like. You can come up with nonsensical explanations for GPS that you can't mathematically validate in any way. And you can just choose not to look into the mathematics of how aircraft actually fly, and what you're describing isn't a problem. Because I know your to support this is your misunderstanding of a particular video and paper that was posted. So either you are deliberately choosing to misunderstand, or I'm not sure what's required to actually explain this to you. Because it's been explained to you many, many times in chat.
Dude.
And you're choosing to ignore the explanation.
I don't know if you can hear me. I'm in storage. I don't know if you can hear me, but I've been through this with Zanuck and others in here for hours. It's not about me misunderstanding it at all. It's about there is no mechanism that you can name that forces the plane to go sideways twice as fast without any notice of it by the pilot, and he's got a cruising speed in another vector that's at a lower speed. And if he's going west southwest, it really fucks him up because then he'd have to be going backwards and sideways faster than he's going forwards. You haven't done the math.
Yeah, so a direct example of something like this, which I don't know why people don't talk about more, is if you were just on a boat in a current of water, because then you'd essentially have to have all the exact challenges that you would have with your air claim, with your atmosphere claim. It's literally the same thing. And when you're dealing with the boat, somehow the physics are entirely different than what you guys are claiming are happening with the plane. So it literally has nothing to do with what takes place, and you guys defend it regardless. I don't know why.
Well, you can work out the mathematics. Can I present the mathematics to you right now off the top of my head? No, I can't. But I've seen others that have done so.
Well, forget the mathematics. Why would a commercial airline pilot and military veterans and military pilots come forward saying they think the Earth is flat, and that all their instruments
they're liars. They are liars.
Okay.
They're
Now
liars.
they're liars. Okay.
Sorry. I'm sorry. They're lying.
Okay.
And they've been caught.
So you think?
And
Hold on.
keep the videos
So you
up
think
despite
there is
being
not
caught lying.
one? You think there's not one?
As far as I'm aware of, that is verified and has not been caught lying. Not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay, please explain caught lying to me.
Well, there's a simple example from Taboo Conspiracy. F-16 fighter pilot bladder testimony was blatantly caught lying by a commercial pilot. Bob Nodell lied about being a commercial pilot. I mean, there's tons and tons of people, dude. They just lie.
See, I believe there's a lot of credibility for Flat Earth. Cackle at me if you want, whatever. But what we're talking about right now, this topic, planes not flying, the atmosphere, all this stuff is not a hill to die on if you're trying to prove Flat Earth.
Dude, Bob never lied about being a pilot. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
you weren't even
this is
around
strange.
back then.
Bob did lie
Yeah,
This
about
is
being
also
a pilot.
easily provable by basic mechanics.
I'm not. So, Bob
No,
is
it's not.
here with us anymore. I'm not. I'll just disengage from the Bob conversation out of respect. But
Yeah, thank
he
you.
did.
They have gyroscopic tools to keep the plane level, and they have air pressure pushing up on the plane wings to create lift. They've got this mapped out over a trajectory. Planes are you almost relate a plane flying like a bullet, not really
Are you
flying.
leaving out the rotation of the Earth? That's like the whole point.
Well, that's what I'm telling you. Like that variable coming in, you're like saying that's some dominant, unsolvable variable.
Well, it's quite literally the opposite of how we manage boats in water. That's the problem. Like you guys are escaping the physical motion of the water, challenging the direction of the plane. So,
Do you understand why those might be different?
No, it literally should not be different. Both mediums operate as a fluid, okay, and you're operating as a current that you're claiming is happening at a particular speed. So if we make a prediction the same way that we would as a boat, it should be the same kind of calculation for a plane. But that's not what happens.
Riggs, I can't help you. You got to learn some physics.
It's just like the framing. You guys just go off into what you guys have seen.
I'm
That's
saying
not
that
a response. That's not a valid response. Just to ad hom someone, and that's how you're going. You're just bailing out with an ad hom.
If anybody, if you've ever swam in a river, you fight the current going in any particular direction. You have to plan. You have to basically plan how you get from one point to another. Otherwise, you're going to miss it, or you're going to get caught in it or something like that. Like it completely changes your relative position and your destination. So you have to
the equations, and you'll find that they are very different for a boat and for a plane.
I know that's the problem.
That's fine, but what you're describing is just complete misunderstanding of any kind of kinematics. And furthermore,
I disagree. We apply the boat, and with as far as the Earth spinning and the atmosphere spinning with it, it's you guys are totally missing it. I think
not the same thing.
I've heard it
Sorry.
explained so many different ways. I just
Yeah,
don't think that's
you're
a
completely
valuable point.
missing it. I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah, but you're completely missing
No,
it.
I think you guys have literally explained this 1,000 different ways. I've been here for a couple of months and heard it a different way, almost every time. And there's no new
Yeah,
way
you're
to
wrong.
frame it.
You're wrong.
Well, you
You're
don't know what
wrong,
I'm about
though.
to say, so let me complete my
Go
thought
ahead.
here.
Okay. What you said before was wrong.
I'm-
Go ahead.
Okay, fine. But what I'm saying is this is not like a hill to die on to prove the Earth is flat. There's other
It's not about proving it. No,
huge
it's not
choke
about proving.
points. There's
Oh,
huge
I agree.
choke points
I
that we
agree.
should
The
prove
Earth shouldn't be
before
in
we
motion.
get into this topic.
Wait a minute.
You guys shouldn't
I
dive
can't-
in.
I
No, I
can't
agree.
complete a sentence.
Guys,
It's impossible to complete a sentence in here. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
guys, let Tank finish. Let Tank finish. No, let Tank finish his thought.
Go ahead, Tank.
There's got to be bigger choke points to prove before we try to get into this semantical or framing argumentative place. Like it's just an endless loop. People,
This is the topic
know-
though, right now.
You're going to say the
It's-
same thing. You're saying the same thing over again.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can stay out of it if you want. That's fine.
Oh,
And
okay.
this has to do with motion,
Yeah,
not
but-
the actual. It's the motion.
Yeah, listen, Tank.
Look,
that's
I'm
a
not
fair
trying to
point.
stay
If you
out of it. I'm trying to
think
get
there's a
into
better-
it. If you haven't
Hey,
noticed,
listen, if you think there's a better argument for you, that's fine. For me, this ends the globe, and I can show you how. If you actually understood what I'm saying, I think you would understand that it does end the globe.
I'm trying
And
to
it doesn't
expose that
work.
you guys know this as well as I do, that the language model that
It's
they
not about
use is
proving
not
it's
going to
flat
fit
either.
the way you guys are explaining it.
This
They're just going to call you, like, they're going to say
It's
what
not
they
about
always
proving
say,
it's
that you
flat.
don't understand physics or you don't understand a certain aspect of it.
Listen,
Come
I
on,
don't
Newman,
care.
you're talking
I don't
all
care
over
what
him. I
anyone
can't hear
thinks.
what he's saying.
Well, he's saying the same thing over again, right? He's
Okay.
saying that it's not a hill to die on. That's fine. But regardless, dude, it's not about proving it's flat, right? That's a misconception. We're not
You're
out to prove
sound
it's
biting me.
flat. We don't
You're
care.
doing this
We don't-
to everyone
care
that
what they
talks
think.
about this. You just take a little
Sound biting
piece
you.
that you heard and try to make a big logic out of it. People are framing
can we
No, I'm
big,
not trying to
big
make big
ideas.
logic. I'm trying to just satisfy your whatever you were saying, so we can move on. I'm not worried about
I'm
what you
looking for
think about this argument.
satisfaction from you, man. Like,
I'm not
just,
worried about a hill to die on.
Get
It's not
back to
about
the
proving
topic.
it's flat. We're not
Guys,
out.
we're
Get back to the topic. Airplanes over
Oh, God,
Hey, you
never
guys
mind.
keep-
Never mind. I'm in story.
You guys keep
Yeah.
flipping each other, and it's really hard to hear the conversation. So try to just go one at a time, please.
The only reason that you're using this meme is because of the dramatic impact it seems to have when you say 1,000 miles an hour versus 500 miles an hour. That's the only reason. And when you frame it in a very simplified and incorrect way without considering the underlying math, knowing full well that people lack the ability to actually understand the math for themselves, that's the reason that this is a hill to die on.
Dude, don't people fly
So you're
planes
saying,
without
well,
living?
you're accusing. Wait, you're accusing me of this is just a tactic that I've made a meme that's shocking and it's supposed to be effective, even though I don't think it has any sense to it whatsoever. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you may be, but the reason that you're so attached to it is the impact of 1,000 versus 500, because that's what the meme says. That's
Why would you assume that? Why would you assume I'm attached to it for some reason that you made up in your head?
Because I've seen people explain to you why you are wrong countless times on this topic,
Said that.
and you to be incorrect.
But I'm not wrong. It is 500. Listen, the plane takes off at a latitude of 500 miles an hour eastward. It has to land at a place that's 1,000 miles an hour. That's no straw man. That's not wrong. That's the actual facts. It's only the globe that I'm presenting. That's the globe claims, not any flat Earth claim. It's what the globe claims.
No, the globe claim is the atmosphere moves with the earth. Argument done.
And it doesn't work. The atmosphere is pushing the plane. If the atmosphere is pushing the plane, that would be a wind. The wind's going all directions. That doesn't work.
the atmosphere
Listen, the
only
atmosphere-
exists because of the Earth's magnetic field. So it's locked inside of the Earth's
Okay,
magnetic field. Region. Very
It's
simple.
not an answer either. That's not the one the Globers get.
It's a clear answer.
They don't go with magnetic field, bro. You're not even up on what the Globers claim.
It doesn't matter though. None of that matters. What Left Lane said is perfectly sufficient. The atmosphere is more or less moving with the Earth, give or take like 20 miles per
what's the
hour.
force?
Give or take 20 miles per hour in either direction. That
Why
means
does
since the plane's
Never
traveling through the atmosphere, if the plane's traveling through the atmosphere is going to indeed push the plane. That's what it does.
Oh yeah.
So what allows the air to
wind.
breathe around you.
wind. Wait, hold on. So you're saying a wind pushes the plane? A wind?
Yeah. You never
Because that's the
noticed
only
that?
thing if air is pushing the plane, then it'd be a wind. Winds go in all directions. So what's the wind that pushes it perfectly twice as fast sideways, regardless of the winds pushing it in other directions?
Yeah, you're saying the
Name
wind
that
goes
wind.
in all directions. You're saying the wind goes in all directions, but you're also stating
Yeah.
that in our model. You're also stating that in our model, the speed changes from 500 miles per hour to 1,000 miles per hour over the course of 45 latitudes, right?
Well,
So if the Earth
The
is
speed of
changing
the
by that
ground
much, then the
does.
wind, then the air is changing by that much.
Oh, really? Prove that. Show me that.
New, how does
Show
the
me
atmosphere
that.
work?
Show me all of the air going in one direction exactly at the same pace as the ground in a faster and faster manner. A gradient from the equator to the poles. Show me that wind.
Just
That's
measure the
also
wind speed.
overpowering all the other winds that go in all directions.
Low and
Measure
high
the wind
pressure
speed
systems.
at. Go ahead, Tank.
It's just low and high pressure systems. How does the atmosphere work?
Well,
Yeah, where
Perspective.
do I measure the wind speed? Where do I measure the wind speed to find out the sport that we know it's going to work? What are you
Yo,
saying?
you're
Kosho?
roboting.
God
You're
damn.
roboting. Can we get like a 1v1 also? A lot of people just jumping in.
Hey, go ahead,
It's
Tank.
hard.
Go ahead, Tank.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to get a conclusive statement made when you're being clipped every sentence.
That's true.
I just wanted to ask, like, how does the atmosphere work then? Right, I'm looking at it like there's a magnetic field that's protecting this area that can allow condensation and all the things that create air pressure. But how does it work if it's not?
It's not just the magnetic field that does it. Gravity is pulling the gases down. The magnetosphere helps block radiation that would strip away upper layers of the atmosphere.
All right. Yeah, solar winds or solar flares and that type of stuff. The magnetic field helps protect the atmosphere from that. But even without the magnetic field, if there weren't any solar winds or solar storms that hit the Earth, then our atmosphere would be pretty consistent with what it is now. The magnetic field doesn't assist it, much like outside of that, very much.
Well, I was under the assumption that you could, like, planes are fine in the flat Earth model. We just have an existing atmospheric condition that's just not on in a globe. But
Okay.
Well, it's the
Maybe.
fact that planes aren't fine on a flat Earth model, so they need this like cudgel to hit people with to avoid them ever engaging with that. And
Money in the water.
stands is just completely disingenuous.
Poisoning well.
Well, I mean, what Tank
The plane-
said. Go ahead, sorry.
As soon as you look into like flight planning and inertial navigation, the globe is completely validated and the flat Earth is destroyed. There's no way around it except to try to do something with the ether, which is the argument I recommend you adopt.
It's just not true. All right,
Well-
finally, I'm out of storage. Can you guys hear me more clearly now? Am I much more clear?
Yep.
I'm not roboting anymore. Okay, yeah. So everything you just said is completely false. They treat the Earth as if it's stationary, and you're saying that people are avoiding it, and talking about how would it not work on a flat Earth? The only way it works is as it's flat and stationary. All flight simulators assume a stationary level environment to train the pilots. And you act like that's something that this is an argument that flat earthers would avoid when it's the one that kills the globe. It kills it.
Yeah.
It cannot
I don't
work.
think it's necessary. I don't think it's.
No,
Go ahead, Lachlan.
the fact that you just said that simulators and stuff don't consider curvature and rotation, that agrees with the fact, the statements I make. It doesn't matter. Plane would work on either model just the same. So why would a simulator consider all that if it's not necessary to consider all that? It's not an argument.
But it would be necessary. It would be ultimately necessary. What's the force that makes the plane go twice as fast sideways when it's headed south towards the equator, where you already agree it would have to be moving 500 miles per hour exactly sideways faster?
Yeah,
Why
that's
do
a
you
What's the force
broken,
that does
that's a
that?
broken question.
Why do you
What
answer that?
the answer was a wind? So you're saying there's a wind? So there's a wind that does this? Is that what you're trying to claim?
No, I said the air. So if the air is
air
moving
pushing the plane is a
faster or
wind.
slower, dude.
The air pushing the
If
plane
air's
is a
moving
wind.
faster, dude. If the air's moving faster or slower, whether going north or south, and the plane's traveling through the air, right? Then it's going to experience what's it called? trade, or not trade winds. What's it called? Crosswinds. What was that?
What?
Crosswinds.
Yeah, crosswinds go in all directions. So what's your answer?
Okay.
What moves the plane? What, regardless of the crosswinds, regardless of air moving the plane, what's the mechanism that makes the plane automatically twice as fast sideways, regardless of all the other crosswinds, moving it in other directions? What's that magical wind?
It's not
Name
magic
it. Name the
or
force.
anything. It's not.
Well,
It's not
how the
magic
force
or
is.
anything.
Explain the
I said to
dynamics.
you.
Is it actually
Explain the
twice as
dynamics.
fast though, going east to west than it is north and south? Like, is that actually even true? The thing he's saying right
It
now.
would be 1,000 miles an hour east to west, right? West to east, 1,000 at the equator. If it takes off the latitude, it only has 500 miles per hour, right? Because that's where it's closer to the poles. It only conserves the momentum from being on the ground with the Earth moving. So even if we let you beg the question and keep that 500 miles per hour, conserve momentum all the way to the equator, regardless if you say it's incremental, you have to name it. Is it the pilot somehow doing this? Is it the winds incrementally perfectly doing it and overriding all the other winds? What is the mechanism? Explain it dynamically for me, Kosho. Explain the dynamics of what happens here with all the other winds included.
It's already been explained.
Oh yeah, you said the atmosphere. That doesn't
Pose
explain
pictures
it.
from the models.
45 degrees. Like the speed change you're talking about is 45 degrees. That's about 3,000 something miles, directly north or south. Yeah, if you're traveling that, then you're going to experience crosswinds, primarily in one direction over the other. Absolutely.
So the way you're conflating the winds with the movement of the Earth now. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not conflating
for
them. I'm
both.
telling you that the
Okay.
plane
Flight
travels
pathing.
through the air.
Yeah, because there's a 500 mile per hour eastward difference. Do you agree with that?
Tangential velocity, sure.
Correct. Right. So how is it now in sync with the new tangential velocity all of a sudden? Where's the force that makes it do that twice as fast sideways?
It's moving through the air. I don't know
Well,
why
the
you keep
air, we
trying to be
already
told
agreed.
this.
Air pushing the planes are winds and winds pushing in all directions. So how's that one wind overcoming the other winds?
So if you go outside right now, the air's going to be pushing you in all directions?
No. In fact, you
No,
say
it's
that
going to be
in
pushing
fact,
you
the globe
in
has to
probably one
swing.
direction.
The globe, in fact,
No.
this is funny because the globe, what this argument usually gets to is the globe's like, well, if there's no winds, that's when we know it's in sync. So you're saying that's the no winds that's making the plane move twice as fast sideways, huh?
No. I'm telling
Okay,
you
so
that it's going to experience
what's the force?
crosswinds.
Just
It's going to be
explain it.
if you're going north to south or south to north, it's going to be primarily from one direction. It
Just
may
explain the
get some from the
forces
other
on the
direction, but
plane. Pretend I'm a
dude,
like a
why
5-year-old,
are you
right?
still asking
You're
me
saying
this? The
these are
answer's
the
given to
forces
you.
on the plane. Explain the forces on the plane, like you just explain it to like a 5-year-old that needs to know
To a
how the
5-year-old,
plane's
okay.
being pushed.
Okay, to a 5-year-old,
Explain it
there's
to a
winds.
5-year-old that how
I mean, it's already been said to
how
you.
the wind pushes the plane in one direction consistently to catch up to the speed that he needs to make up for, and how the other winds are pushing it in the other direction, and how the wind that's pushing it to keep up with the Earth knows how fast it needs to go on top of the winds pushing it in the other direction. How does it know like the other winds are how much to compensate? There's no wind that solves this for you. Just saying it's the air and having a kinematic idea that it's automatically in sync because we're just going to kinematically just cross it off, right? We're just going to say
You
it's
don't want the answer?
automatically in sync with the atmosphere. If you can
You
explain it
asked me to do
actually,
something.
how the forces on the plane, explain the forces, the actual forces on the plane, and
How
how it
long is
works
this
over the
question?
period.
Yes, I get it. Explain it like you would to a child. I did that. I already did
Explain
that.
what's happening.
I already did that, and I said to you,
Well, do it again. Do it
crosswinds.
again.
It
Do it
experiences.
again.
It
Crosswind.
experiences. Dude, it's always like this with you, dude. It's
Well,
infuriating
you're
me, man.
not
Stop
naming it.
talking. You have to
We
stop. You
already,
have
we
to
already,
choose. You have to decide to
crosswinds
stop talking,
go in all
dude.
directions. Oh, you
You have
said
to
you
decide
already
to stop
explained it.
talking in this perspective.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You said crosswinds, but we know those go in all directions. What's your answer?
All right, I'm done.
Okay, so you're done because you know you have no answer, or because you decided that, or you're going to feel like
Because it's not
unprepared
worth
to
it to try
obey.
to fight through your words, dude. You don't stop talking.
Okay,
Even whenever
I'm
you
giving
stop
you the
talking,
floor.
you don't stop
I'm
talking.
giving you the floor. Explain it now. I'll shut up.
Again, if you're at 45 degrees north and you're going to the equator, and the Earth is moving faster, and the air is moving faster as you travel further south, right? And the plane's traveling through the air, then the air is going to be persistently carrying the plane from one side over the other. Just like in the GIF that I created for you 3 years ago, it's the same principle. all I've done was show that these things are moving at a different speed as you go down this page, and it perfectly ends up with the with the faster thing at the bottom because the wind pushes it because it's moving within the wind, within the air.
What about the winds pushing the opposite direction?
What about it?
Well, that blows your whole theory because you're having to have winds go in one direction to push it in the perfect sync with the Earth. What about the winds pushing it the opposite way?
It's not going to outdo the air that's moving that much faster in that direction.
What are you talking about? What do you mean that
He's
much
talking.
faster?
He's talking about
500 mile per hour difference.
He's talking about the
You
jet
realize-
streams that are pretty consistent that high up.
Yeah, jet streams make it even worse for this argument because then they're going 200 miles per hour faster than the supposed turn of the Earth, right? So if you're going 200 miles per hour faster, how do you jump out of a jet stream and all of a sudden be in perfect sync with the Earth so you can treat it as stationary when you're landing?
I'm not talking about jet streams. You can
Okay,
bring
but that
jet
would
streams
help.
if you want. It doesn't matter. I'm just talking about regular air.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because both of them debunk it. You said what? Because the winds in the opposite direction aren't that strong compared to the atmosphere going in. What?
No. The local wind.
You realize
the wind. The
problem is
the
there can't be
airspeed.
any
Dude,
estimation.
dude, stop, dude.
Okay, this is the last thing I'm going to say. Then you go ahead. I'm saying the estimation words. Any estimation words are like death in the eyes of a pilot that's trying to land somebody on a runway that he's treating as stationary. There can't be like maybe a little bit this way or that way. But go ahead. Explain how it works accurately.
Okay, the airspeed at any location compared with the wind speed compared with the ground. Let's say that it's 15,000 feet. Let's say that it's a maximum of like 25 miles per hour. The wind speed, like the speed the air is moving with respect to the surface beneath it, 25 miles per hour in any direction. Okay, now that's the difference between those two things, and the difference between the rotation of the surface, like the tangential velocity from as you travel from north to south, it's going to be a much greater speed when you go 3,000 miles. So it doesn't matter that it's going in all directions, give or take 25 miles per hour, because overall the tangential velocity is increasing by 500 miles per hour, which is going to be it's going to primarily influence the plane more than the 25 miles per hour, in any direction.
So I got overall, I got primarily, I got give and take. Comparing this to that, I mean, so this is how you explain it to the pilot that's afraid he's not going to be able to land the plane because it's going to be a moving surface below him. Well, overall, these other winds are going to overpower the other ones, except that maybe they'll be a little bit stronger today, but you won't have to worry about it at all. You kidding?
I tell him to be a cab driver. If he's that afraid or that clueless that he's like scared to fly because of this, then I would just say just drive a cab and forget about it. I don't know.
If you can't deal with all these estimations about how we think that it might be in sync with the Earth when you're landing, and you're just trained to treat it as stationary, if you can't handle these estimation words we're giving you, then you should just go ahead and be a cab driver because pilots, they're fierce, man. They go and they just rely on the air to make sure they're in sync with the Earth. If you're not that strong and that tough and that willing to go up in the air and just expect the air is going to move your plane twice as fast sideways so that you could be in sync with the Earth and treat it as stationary? Do you know how comical that sounds? Think of how ridiculous that is.
You know that
It's just
pilots
ridiculous.
can compare their airspeed and the ground speed, so they'll be able to tell right away how fast they're moving compared to with the surface, right?
Well, be careful because when you say ground speed,
they're not going to get tripped up. They're not going to get tripped up by some extremely big difference. Yeah.
Now, just for the people that are listening, when people are listening, don't let Kosho think that there's some kind of ground speed that they're measuring about this eastward tangential velocity. They have no measure of this eastward tangential velocity to make sure that the plane is going sideways in perfect sync twice as fast. They have no measure of that. They just have to put faith in the air.
There's no need in it.
To make sure.
There's
the
no
ground
need in it.
speed has nothing to do with the movement of the Earth.
Go ahead, Lifeline.
Yeah, there's no need in it. He's right. There's no reason to calculate it.
What?
There's no reason to calculate for tangential velocity of Earth's rotation.
Yeah, because the Earth is stationary. That's why there's no reason.
Because the
Otherwise, there would
atmosphere
be.
moves with it. because the atmosphere moves with the Earth.
Dude, that's just a concept that you're just saying, oh, because the atmosphere, we can just say none of that exists. The 500 mile per hour difference doesn't make any difference because we're thinking about it as if it's stationary, and the atmosphere is just going to subtract and add whatever it is that it needs by the time it goes one way or the other. That's just a concept in your head that you have to rely. I don't know how you fly and think that you're actually on a spinning ball treating it as stationary, because there would be a 500 mile per hour tangential velocity difference that somehow you're relying on the air to make up for you. You're putting all your faith in this air, even though the air as winds are moving in all directions. Or you're like, wait a minute, oh shit, there's a westward wind that's moving me pretty fast the other direction. I hope that this air is overcoming that westward wind, and now it's going to make sure I'm in perfect sync, not just 1,001 or 1,002 to 5 miles an hour, 995. It has to be in perfect sync at 1,000 miles per hour sideways, mind you, as it's landing in a perpendicular direction. What is the mechanism that keeps the plane moving with the Earth eastward as it's landing?
Well, your argument and all the words that you use and all the argumentation you got, you are completely debunked by the fact that the atmosphere moves with the Earth.
Doesn't work, bro. If the atmosphere were forcing the plane to go 500 miles per hour eastward, then how is it going to go against the spin when it wants to actually go somewhere? Right now, the atmosphere, the air is pushing me backwards because of this air that doesn't have any effect on anything I know about. But now the air is pushing me 500 miles per hour backwards as I'm trying to fly west. You understand that doesn't work? Because if it was forcing the plane to do anything, then the plane would have to deal with that force because you'd have to fly against the spin.
So when you're on the ground, sitting on the ground, is the wind blowing over your head at 500 miles an hour? No.
Exactly.
Don't drown in the Molly water.
He's in the natural neutral buoyancy pool. Oh my god.
This is impossible.
He doesn't.
Nope, don't even think about trying it again, dude. Drop out or get it fixed.
You don't feel
Power when you're sitting on the ground. And I said, yeah, of course, because it's stationary.
They plan the flight path out so far. As
Okay, so yeah, I guess I cut out.
Streams. Okay.
Yeah, I guess when left lane said the 500 miles per hour, you don't feel 500 miles per hour when you're sitting on the ground. And I said, yeah, of course, because it's stationary. That's why we don't feel the 500 mile per hour wind.
No, I said it, the wind blowing, and you're standing on the ground in these crazy winds you're talking about. I mean, the wind, if there was this wind blowing at 500 miles an hour, it's just absurd. I don't understand why you don't understand.
There was a wind blowing at 500 miles an hour. Where's that straw man come from?
Moves with the Earth, and that totally negates everything you're saying.
Okay, so you're saying the atmosphere, the winds of this atmosphere are what pushes the plane?
No, weather is weather. The winds aloft at the altitudes that I fly, they could be going in any direction. They prevail.
So then how does
they could be blowing out of the south, out of the east, out of the west.
Right.
I mean,
that's
5,000 feet they could be blowing. And we accommodate that. We figure that. We know what it is.
Yeah.
With the electronics today, it calculates it for you. So, but I mean,
what's the wind that overcomes all those winds? What's the wind that makes you move twice as fast sideways so you could be moving at 1,000 miles an hour eastward with Earth's rotation?
See, there's not that wind.
The atmosphere.
There's not that wind.
The atmosphere has to be pushing the plane perfectly in one direction. And if it's the air moving the plane, it's called a wind.
No, you're forgetting about the momentum. It's
how does the atmosphere move the plane without it being a wind?
Momentum.
Momentum comes from being on the ground. That's the 500 I gave you.
You don't lose it when you leave the ground. It's still there.
500.
And
you keep it. You keep the 500. Yeah. You don't have 1,000. You don't have the 1,000. Where's the extra 500 coming from?
And then as you fly south, You're gradually flying into an increasing tangential velocity that equates to like
what?
a mile and a half
Increasing
an hour
tangential velocity of what?
crosswind. Okay, that equates to about a
Increasing
mile and a
tangential
half.
velocity of
Okay,
what, though?
okay, nah, fuck it, man.
No, what's the increasing tangential velocity of?
Dude, Dave, I don't know if you're delayed or, I mean, you got to just go back and forth though, because you end up.
I'm sorry.
Over.
I really didn't mean to cut you off. I was trying to get you to qualify. You're just saying it's an increasing eastward tangential velocity. Yeah, we know that about the ground, but what are you saying? The air is increasing that way because the wind's going the opposite way too. So how are you saying the air is increasing in one direction when we know wind's going all directions? That's the problem, Buffalo.
Yeah, and then if there were, let's say that there is a trade wind or whatever, what's it called? Just fill in the word for me. What's it called again?
The jet stream.
Yeah, let's say that there is a jet stream, right? It would still have to be carrying you directly to your destination or aiming you in that direction. Like it would have to be a precise jet stream for the exact direction you're going or plan to go. So,
well, no, but the jet streams will make it worse, Riggs, because the jet streams are said to be moving 200 miles per hour faster than the rotation.
Well, it depends on their elevation.
Now you're going
you can have a jet stream
rotation.
that goes the other way. You can rise up 10,000 feet or something like that. But it would be really noticeable. Planes tend to just kind of reach an altitude and kind of hit that altitude and then they descend. So, I don't think that's what's happening based on my experience in a plane. I wouldn't pick that as an argument.
It's not about how the plane flies or if the jet streams are real or if there's like lift or if it uses the air or any of these things that are strawman. It's not about that. It's about it needs to be in perfect sync when it's landing with the eastern tangential velocity. So if it's out of sync whatsoever, if there's any variables, you can't say predominantly more this way or almost, or any of these estimation words when the ballers use those words, they're like, oh, it would be negligible. No, you don't want to hear negligible at any of this. And they have to say that it would be so little compared to the actual winds. But then really what they're saying is this would overcome the actual winds, this tangential atmosphere would negate all the real winds and make you all of a sudden 500 miles per hour perfectly in sync. And even if they could name the mechanism, which they can't, which everybody heard, they can't name the mechanism. They're just saying wind's going all directions. There is no mechanism, right? So even if they could have an answer for this, they would have to explain how that mechanism then is carrying the plane sideways in perfect sync with the rotation as it's landing at whatever angle in a perpendicular
almost as if there is no motion in the first place.
There is an answer for this, and I gave it to you before. This is
come on, you want to get into it, Jeremy? You have no answer. You're just going to say the air. The air moves it perfectly.
Man, are you ever going to stop talking?
Accepting the tangential baller statement. Just don't give me the baller tangential. Just don't give me the baller kinematic concept as if that's an answer. I know their answer.
Okay, take a breath, bro.
Yeah. Anyways, if you're chopping it up with Coriolis, whoever mentions wind first loses. You automatically lost once you mention wind.
I don't know. We were saying that the Earth would be moving eastward 500 miles per hour faster, which they agreed to, and then they couldn't name a mechanism, but to say the air or the atmosphere or the winds are somehow overcoming the other winds to make it in perfect sync, so it could treat it as stationary.
Dude, I gave you the answer for this before. You're in a medium. Medium's moving 500 miles an hour.
Explain the forces as you go through. Explain the actual forces when you do.
New perspective.
You'll see why I'm right. Go ahead.
Just don't talk when people are talking, man.
I've just been through it with Jeremy. Jeremy, explain the forces. Don't just explain the kinematic concept that the air is moving at 501, 502, because that's just the idea. That doesn't explain the force on the plane.
Let him explain it.
I'm just telling you right now, whoever mentions wind first, you automatically lose. That's like rolling a 1 when you're playing CeeLo. Second of all, I told you how this shit works. You're in a medium. It's moving 500 miles an hour. You're going along with 500 miles an hour with the medium. You go to 501. Now you're eventually will catch up to 501. That's where the Coriolis happens in their model. That's where you get the deviation from when you go from 500 to 501. You need the tangential speed change for the Coriolis effect to happen. You make a speed
so
change, you get the
Jeremy.
Coriolis effect.
Okay, what's the force on the plane that makes it go to 501, 502, 503, all the way up to 1,000? What's the force that moves, that pushes the plane? Name the force.
You're in the medium that's moving.
That's not a force.
You're just going. It'd be like if you're in a river. Okay, well, if you're in a river with a boat, and the river is moving at 501 miles an hour, and then you move to a part of the river where it's going at 501 miles an hour, what's the force making the boat move?
Well, that would be like the winds or the currents. The currents are the same as winds, right? So you're naming winds without naming winds, which
I'm not
makes you
talking
lose in
about
your
wind.
mind.
Not talking
Currents
about
are the
wind.
same as winds. Currents in a
said wind
river are
first.
comparable to
You
winds. The currents
You said
are the
wind first,
only
you lost.
thing. The currents are the only thing you compare to the winds, bro. You can't say that something's pushing the plane like the river, which is currents, and then not say it's winds when we're talking about air.
Yeah, you
You
can't
mentioned
separate.
wind first. You lost, bro. You
Those are
lost.
the same thing.
They're the same thing. You lost because you were trying to say it without saying it.
In fact,
No, it's because
Noah
they have the
debunked
air
this.
moving at 500 miles an hour.
There's no calm days on a globe, so that's done.
I'm just talking about the air moving at 500 miles an hour, not a wind. It's just the air that pushes the plane, but it's not a wind. Okay, that's really an explanation.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said wind. I agree with Jeremy, but the air moving at that speed moves the plane at that speed because the plane's in that moving the air that's moving faster. I called
So
it.
the dynamics.
I called it crosswinds, but that's actually probably it's definitely incorrect to have said that because it's not actually applying a force on the plane. Is that the plane is in that medium that's moving that speed. Jeremy's analogy of the river Jeremy's analogy of the river is sound.
It's just a concept. It's just a concept that the atmosphere is moving the plane perfectly in sync, no matter what the winds are doing. It's just a concept, the idea. But you're not showing how the forces pushing the plane sideways are actually dynamically applied because there is no force moving the plane sideways twice as fast, or there'd be all kinds of problems with actual flights. If the plane were being forced to go along with the spin of this Earth, you would never be able to fly against the spin.
Yeah, can I ask a
That's
question?
not even close to being true.
Oh, really?
Go ahead, Bob.
So what's the force that's moving it backwards as it's going westward? What's the force that's making it go eastward still with the tangential velocity backwards perfectly as it goes west southwest, and it needs twice as fast sideways, backwards and sideways? Would that be a wind pushing it head on backwards? Is that what you're not going to say because you've been?
You mentioned wind. You lost again.
Oh shit!
The speed you're describing is not in reference to the surface. It's in reference to some outer space reference frame.
No,
the
speed
surface
is the actual
moving at the speed the air is moving. So
that's the concept, but it doesn't fix it. Just the concept that you're going to say we're going to cancel out that 500. The pilot doesn't even need to be trained to worry about it because the air is automatically going to make him move backwards to the surface exactly the amount, even though the winds are pushing him the other way, and even though he's flying in a different direction, and the winds are pushing him all over the place. Kinematically, in this kinematic concept, that's why kinematics and dynamics, that separation is very important because the kinematic concept is we're just not going to worry about it. The air's moving with it, and whatever you say that you're moving this direction, we're going to subtract this amount. That's how much the air moved, even though we're not going to say the air pushing the plane is a wind, because that's what it would technically be. We have to avoid that at all costs because Jeremy says you'll lose, and because it would debunk the whole idea that the air is moving the plane. It has to be a wind. You can't say the air moves the plane without it being a wind. That I don't know how many times I have to say that.
So like they claim that the planes like basically naturally or like automatically adjust for all these like Earth spin Coriolis things in like each directions. Like I guess the plane has a or like the tower guys are like figuring out like what they need to be doing. I don't know, but so but don't some pilots also have like like propeller planes that they're flying around, kind of more like old school style, where they don't have like automated systems, or like wouldn't they train pilots in case of like emergency if like their equipment goes like off, like how to deal with the earth spin, and like how to, like wouldn't they have to teach like pilots the model just in case like the navigation, like the assist, the automatic stuff like turns off, like so like they
Yeah,
can
like what about a guy in a
adjust.
squirrel suit? What about a guy in a
I'll
squirrel
answer.
suit that's trying to like
I'll answer
thread the needle
that
through like a small
question
little space? What about the earth
if
moving
you let
separately
me.
from him?
I'm going to answer that question that QOP has. QOP, when we do our first cross country, and some instructors will allow electronics. Mine didn't. I had to plot it out on paper. I had to strap a map to my leg, and I flew without electronics on my first cross country.
Yeah,
So it
so
doesn't matter.
did you account? Oh, so it just doesn't matter there either. There's no math
No,
involved for like earth
you
spin
just
or.
draw a line between your two airports, and then you pick checkpoints along the way, and you fly heading. And like every 8 or 15 miles, you see your checkpoint and confirms your own course, and you just keep flying and blah blah blah. So it's
Yeah,
not a matter, it's not
so
an
you're
issue.
only
If
you only
you're
have to.
off a little because of your miscalculated your headwind or your crosswinds, you just correct for it. If you're off a little bit, you just correct for it and continue on.
Well, isn't
But you
that
don't
like
correct for the
the?
tangential velocity of the ground.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
exactly.
don't
Like they don't.
we don't talk about no tangential velocity of the ground. We just fly.
Well, exactly. So
Because it's
that kind of
stationary. That's the only way it would.
that debunks the whole automated system. Like covers that stuff because you just said that when you do it, without that, you're not accounting for any of it. You're just adjusting for wind and stuff.
Yeah, that inertial
I mean, there
navigation
is an
system
actual.
idea is out the window with that. If they have to go to manual, I mean, people didn't have computers or any of that kind of stuff, right? So they just flew wherever they wanted. They landed wherever they wanted. They always treated it as.
I've done some calculations on it, and I'm no mathematician, but if there was zero wind and I wasn't was to not correct for any earth rotation, or I think I would be off like maybe a degree every 10 miles, something like that. And so I
Wait,
would see that on my
you're correcting
checkpoints as
for
I
earth
was
rotation
flying,
now?
and I would just correct for it. But the point of that
Wait,
is, it's so subtle. It's such a minute thing that it's just not. I mean, crosswinds and headwinds and tailwinds are way more influential than anything Coriolis would do.
500 miles an hour by the time you get to the thing is not a minor thing. You're saying you do correct for spin now? I thought
Doesn't
you said you
matter.
didn't correct for
500
spin.
miles an hour doesn't matter.
Well, it doesn't because it's stationary. That's why. That's the only way it wouldn't matter is if it's actually stationary. Otherwise, it would matter. Left lane it would matter a lot.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't matter.
Yeah, it
That's
would.
the point.
Okay, you can tell me that 500 mile per hour difference in the way that the ground's moving from the plane moving wouldn't matter. But I mean, try to land on something moving 500 miles an hour.
Yeah, it sounds like
There is
left
an
lane's in the
actual
magical
argument.
world.
That doesn't
Not
make
us.
any sense, Left.
There is an actual argument here. This just isn't it.
Actually, you just don't see it still, Jeremy.
There's nothing to
Indio,
this. You don't
Indio.
understand.
Somebody, hey, listen. Somebody asked Indio the other day, give me a post of a good debate, and he put a post of me arguing with ballers about this, right? And that, it doesn't mean anything, but it does show that that Indio knows what he's talking about. I got an award over at Flat Earth Fridays for undefeated plane argument, right? Nobody. I talked to the CERN physicist. None of these people have an answer for this because it does not work, Jeremy. Do you think if the Earth
That
was
actually
stationary,
scares me.
they could just treat? You think the Earth were
Doesn't mean no
actually spinning,
answer.
they could just treat it as stationary? Are you crazy? You don't realize of the dynamics, the difference. They could just train the pilot to treat the Earth as stationary, even though it's spinning, bro. Like there is no Coriolis, which you do argue for, which you do get, and you still don't get. They wouldn't even be able to land, bro. You still don't get it, and this is the argument that kills them.
Yeah, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing, new perspective. You've been refuted at every point of the way, and you refuse to acknowledge anything that's said to you about it.
Oh wait, how was I refuted again? Remind me.
Yeah, well, I don't know, man. Everybody here
Yeah,
sees
you
it.
don't know. You just want to hope it happened, but it never did. I don't know
Yeah,
how you
Leflane, if
can.
you're gonna claim that he's been refuted, you should at least be. If he's been refuted
Yeah,
several times,
just a statement.
you'd surely know how he's been refuted, right, Leflane?
Yeah, go ahead. Name the exact way I was refuted.
The atmosphere moves with the earth.
So the atmosphere is forcing the plane to go twice as fast sideways as it gets to 1,000 miles an hour tangential velocity. The atmosphere is forcing the plane. What's that? How's that force work? How is the air pushing the plane without it being a wind? Oh, I guess I've been refuted because you said atmosphere. Oh, that's your idea of refuted. Okay, well then never mind.
Winds are defined relative to the surface. The air is moving.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Make your
So
point.
have you done kinematics and worked out how this would work? Pick the greatest point of difference also. When you run it
the
out,
winds are relative.
Earth.
The winds are relative. That solves it, right?
How much of
point?
the tangential velocity as a function of degrees latitude is required?
Look, it's 500 mile per hour difference. Everybody agrees on that. Just both sides of the argument. It's a 500 mile per hour difference between where the plane takes off from and where it lands. That's the only thing you need to worry about. How does it make up the 500 mile per hour difference? Tell me the mechanism. We're full circle. What's the mechanism that moves the plane twice as fast sideways? Without it just being the air, because the air pushing the plane is a wind, and wind's going all directions, so that's debunked. It can't be the
It's
air
not
pushing the
wind.
plane
You
without
lost
being a
again.
wind.
Fine.
Okay.
You lost
Yeah,
again.
you lost because you're calling the air pushing the plane not a wind. That makes you just like out of the conversation. Like
Yes,
you're right.
because in their model,
It's a
the air
kinematic
moving
concept.
is not a. In their model, the air moving is not a wind. It's just the air moving with
What
earth.
is it
The
then?
wind would be.
Then it's made up.
The wind would be. Well, I mean, if you want to mess around with their model, you got to play by their model rules.
Just
No,
that's so easy to tell how fake the model is.
Jeremy, their model is just the kinematic concepts. Not they don't get to make the rules that kinematic concepts are just going to cancel out this rotation that difference. You can't just say we're going to play by their rules and say they're kinematic concepts, fine, even though we can't name the force that actually pushes the plane perfectly sideways. You can't just say the air does it because the air has to push the plane in one direction. And whether you want to call it a wind or not, but that's what it would have to be. If it's pushing the plane in one direction perfectly,
You said
it has
wind,
to
you lost.
overcome all the other winds. I know that's your fun
You lost
game,
twice.
but I'm not going to play it either. I'm not going to play the Glober game, and I'm not going to play your wind game. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it a current. You're going to say it's just like it's in the water where the currents are pushing it. Well, what's the currents in the air? Well, you can't call it a wind or you lose, but you're making that comparison. So what's your deal, Jeremy? I don't get it.
Okay, wind in the globe model is when the air moves. That's not in sync with the ground. So if the air at the equator is moving 1,000 miles an hour, there's no wind. If it moves 1,001
So it's the
mile an
not
hour,
wind that moves the
now
plane. It's the not wind.
It's the air moving with the globe model. You want to play around with their model, you got to play. You got to use their model.
No, their model.
You're trying to debunk their model, and
yeah, because their model doesn't have the dynamics required for it to work, Jeremy.
You've never
the dynamics, not the kinematics. Dynamics, actual force.
You've never shown that. All you show is that clip that you misinterpret from the calculations and your memes.
I never show what?
Hour per nautical mile would the plane have to change its speed from? Tangentially.
But if it needs to do it incrementally, then that's something the pilot would be aware of, right?
Well, how much would it be?
Well, I know the number. I don't have it written down somewhere. It doesn't matter how much it would be. If it's incremental and it adds up to 500, you name that. You name the force still. If it's the pilot doing it, then you need to also name how it's also achieving to move the plane in one vector eastward to keep up with the Earth and moving forward in another vector. If it's going 400 miles per hour cruising speed in one direction, southward, right? Let's make it west-southwest even. It's moving in one direction. That's one vector, right? The plane only moves in one vector. It can move side to side. But then there has to be a whole separate vector. Let's take west-southwest. Now it's it's going against the spin, right? So how is it going to correct this incrementally eastward, backwards, right? Because now it's going the opposite direction of the spin. How is it correcting eastward if it's going west-southwest? How could it ever? And even if it could correct, it still doesn't work because it's just going side to side and forward. That's one vector. Then it needs to be also moving in another vector eastward, directly eastward with the rotation so that the pilot can treat the Earth as stationary. Two vectors involved here, not just one.
No, there's only one vector. It has two components, right? So you can add the vectors together to get the resultant vector.
Mathematically.
That the aircraft is influenced by, right?
Mathematically, you can. It's just like the rotation and the orbit.
Well.
You can say it's. You can use mathematics and say it's one motion, right? And you could even somehow convince yourself that it would just work because you could do the maths and just use vector maths and say these are two vectors, but we're going to use vector maths and make it seem like one direction, even though we have to explain the actual dynamics of the plane in flight and how it actually works, not just a concept, not just a kinematic. Okay, it's going to cancel out concept.
If you want to do it dynamically, you have to do the actual maths. You have to do the vector maths. You have to add all of the components of the velocity up, work out what the resultant is, how much force you need to actually, we've had this, so it's Dazza here. We've had this conversation, right?
I know.
If you're going,
yeah, but you still didn't get it.
No, I get it. But so
if
you're going,
okay, so you're saying there's corrections that need to be made. But are you also saying, just like everybody else, that the pilot doesn't have to worry about those corrections? Are you saying these corrections need to be mathematically derived, and then the pilot can just crumple it up and throw it in the wastebasket because he treats the Earth as stationary? Is that what you're saying?
But going back to Jeremy's comment there about how the air is essentially attached to the surface, right? Okay. Can you agree that we can consider that as the base case that we have to deal with in the globe model?
No, we can't. But, I mean, even
Why?
if we could, it wouldn't help you. Well, because what Jeremy was explaining is that when there's no wind is when they say it's in sync with the Earth, right? So then you're saying that the force that moves the plane twice as fast sideways is the no wind? It's when there's no wind? Because the other winds could be pushing in other directions. What?
Can we pretend it's a windless day for the entire trip from the North Pole to the equator?
We can do all that, but also you have to understand if we are talking about the rotation, the atmosphere would never be in perfect sync anyway, right? So automatically, even if it worked perfectly, there's fluid dynamics, so it's never in lockstep.
That's right. That's why we have weather patterns.
That all say it's still in lockstep, but they don't say that anymore, Jeremy. They can't say that because of fluid dynamics, and it doesn't matter anyway. Because even if the atmosphere, let's say there's no winds, let's just go from there, and you can work it out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, and we can often see this in Central Australia, right? You get a massive high pressure system that goes from Darwin all the way down to Adelaide, and very low winds. Maybe 5 knots top wind speed. So you can fly 2,500 kilometers without any significant wind, right? So we use that as a use case.
There's no wind. Nothing that forces the plane anywhere but where the plane wants to go. There's no force on the plane whatsoever, except for what the pilot does. Right?
Okay. So what's the pilot doing? What's the pilot doing in a no-wind situation? And how's he flying it?
Wherever he wants forward, right? Wherever he wants.
Following a ground track, isn't he? He's following his plan.
No. He doesn't have to follow a ground track. He can get off. He can get off a ground track. He can fly in circles. He can fly in big circles. Let's not use ground track. We know that they can get off course. We know that they can land wherever they want as if it's stationary. Don't say that the ground course is going to fix this for you. It doesn't.
No, the ground force is not. No. So the pilot's following a plan.
The ground path doesn't fix it. The ground path doesn't fix it. Standing on the ground path doesn't fix it.
No, it doesn't fix it. But we need to assume something about the path so we can discuss the dynamics, right? So so let's say the pilot's flying down a meridian from the North Pole to the equator.
Wait, let me just put that. You've seen the meme that I've sent before, right? It is a 500 mile per hour difference, tangential velocity, right? So it's taking off and it's retaining the ground speed of 500 miles an hour. That's the conserved momentum it gets. So how is the plane moving tangentially sideways twice as fast when it gets to the equator? Is what you need to explain.
Yeah. Okay. So can I explain it? So first of all, if we look at momentum, momentum is relative to a reference frame, right? So if we choose the reference frame of the Earth, we start off and we have no apparent momentum in the aircraft. Only our forward direction along the meridian line that we're flying. So from North Pole to the equator, right? We're heading down and following the meridian line on our map, tracking. So it takes 10 hours to do the flight at 1,000 kilometers an hour, right? Just to make the numbers
What's the
easy.
cruising speed? What's the cruising speed
The
forward?
cruising speed, 1,000 kilometers an hour above the ground on our windless day, right?
No, let's
So
just say
traveling along
400. Let's say 400 miles an
right?
hour. That's about what they
All
fly
right, 400 miles an hour. We're going along for 10 hours, right? So
Yep.
in that 10 hours, we have to pick up 1,000 miles an hour. So it's 100 miles an hour every hour. This is relative to an external observer. You have to pick up the tangential velocity at 100 miles an hour. That's about a mile an hour
Eastward,
every minute.
directly eastward.
Yeah,
Right now,
yeah.
directly eastward. That has nothing to do with the forward motion. How's it going sideways?
You imagine, but the forward motion determines the time. So we're traveling at 400 miles an hour due south. We're picking up 1 mile an hour about every minute or less. 1 mile an hour or less every minute, right?
How?
By just following the ground.
No,
So as the pilot's not aware, right?
There's no ground path. There's no ground path in the situation. He's just flying south. He's going to land wherever he wants.
No. That's where you're making your misunderstanding. The pilot is following a track on the ground. He's trying to stick to a particular path.
Nope. This is what you want to. You want to help. You want to make this help you.
That's exactly what we do.
The pilot can get off course. The pilot can get off course. He can fly wherever he wants. It could be an emergency landing. He can make big loops in the air. The ground path isn't going to fix it for you. No, he can do wherever he wants.
He can. But if he wants to get to where he's going, he has to follow a path.
To the equator. He's flying to a miscellaneous place on the equator, not one particular spot. It's just he's going to the equator. He's going to land as if it's stationary, which we know he can do.
So he's just going to drift around randomly until he maybe gets there.
Don't worry about. Yep, that's exactly what we're doing because we know what can happen. We're not following the ground path because your concept in your head is, as long as he's on the ground path at the place where we're saying that the Earth is moving faster, then we're going to assume that the eastward tangential velocity is also imparted on the plane. No, you can't just say because the ground is at this higher tangential velocity that the plane is automatically at that higher tangential velocity. You have to name the force that pushes the plane sideways.
The pilot is flying it sideways. He's not aware of it, right? Because he's actually following the ground track. And
no ground track. No ground track. He's just
what do we say about
the
delta? What did we say about the delta a minute ago, right? 1 mile an hour every minute.
Before there was any kind of like a commercial air flight,
dude,
people like
you're gonna have to be quiet so someone can answer you.
No, I know where he's going with this, and it doesn't solve it. Just saying that he's on the track.
It doesn't matter that you know where he's going.
Doesn't make the plane go faster sideways. You need to name a mechanism that makes the plane go sideways faster, and it can't be unconscious because the pilot is following a path. That doesn't solve it. He can fly wherever he wants. He doesn't have to follow a ground path.
From a neutral perspective, Dave, I think you should give a little more air. And left lane,
okay, I'm sorry.
To be a one-on-one. I think
I appreciate that. But I do need to make that point because I just don't want him to get going down this track and like Kosho's done before. Well, he's just following the path, and because the path is going faster, we can assume the plane is going faster because he has to keep up with the path. That's not an answer. The pilot before that we had a commercial air flight. No, it's not the answer. I know you wanted that to be the answer. That's why I was cutting you off because it's not an answer. The pilot before we had commercial airplane flights or any of these ground paths or working out any of that, a pilot could just get in his Cessna and fly to the south and land wherever he wants without any kind of ground path. So it has nothing to do with the ground path. We're talking about the forces on the plane that can go faster sideways.
Yeah, he would have navigated there, right? He had to navigate somewhere. All right?
Okay, so yeah.
If you
so
want to understand what's going on, you need to have a destination.
But it's no ground path. Let's just say he's got a destination. He knows how to get there. He might take a few turns left and right. Yep. He might take a circle, but he knows like pretty much how to get there. But the thing is that the ground path doesn't accelerate the plane is my point. Just saying he's following the path doesn't mean he's automatically going eastward sideways because he had to correct for the path. That doesn't answer it. That's an out in the way that they make you think it works, but it wouldn't work that way. You're talking about the force that pushes the plane exactly sideways to overcome the other winds and everything else. Oh yeah, he's correcting for winds, so it doesn't matter as long as he's staying on the path. That's what makes it seem like it works in your head.
Going and going and going.
It doesn't work because the ground path is not an answer for this. It doesn't accelerate the plane sideways.
So we just talked about how much sideways acceleration we need. Sorry, you go.
So he's going to be going 500 miles per hour faster, 1,000. In fact, if he's going from the North Pole, he's going to be going 1,000 miles per hour sideways, right? By making these incremental things, he's going to be going twice as fast as his cruising speed forward. But by the time he gets here, he's not going to realize that now his plane is going 1,000 miles an hour eastward, and he's only going 400 miles per hour forward. What?
So what is his
Really?
cruising speed relative to? What is his cruising speed? It's the maximum speed he can travel is relative to that air, right? And then that is then relative to the ground. So if we've got our windless day, he can only do 400 miles an hour relative to the air, right? Doesn't matter which way he's going, he cannot exceed that. That's his airspeed.
Okay. So how does he get up to 1,000 sideways?
Okay. Now this is where you need to look at your. You've mentioned this reference frames before. What reference frame is that 1,000 kilometers per hour sideways in? That's from an external observer, right? Someone looking at the Earth rotate.
No, it's a real thing. So yeah, but it's a real thing. It's an eastward tangential velocity that would need to be achieved in real time.
Yeah, but he's not aware of that though, because he's traveling with the Earth. He has nothing to tell him he's moving 1,000 sideways.
Either that or there's no movement, right? If he's not aware of it, it's either one of two things: something you haven't explained that is happening, or it's actually stationary, and he doesn't have to worry about it for that reason, which is probably the most likely answer.
And you've just hit that. And I think we mentioned this in our chat before that we cannot distinguish the shape of the Earth by what the pilot is doing here, because the impact on him is so insignificant that there's no we cannot determine whether it's flat or whether it's curved, whether it's stationary or whether it's rotating, right? We cannot.
Well, no, we didn't establish that between us. That would be a ridiculous claim. If he needs to be moving sideways at 1,000 miles an hour, that's not insignificant at all. His plane needs to be going eastward with the rotation 1,000 miles an hour faster than where he started from, and he's only going 400 miles per hour forward. That's not insignificant whatsoever. Why would that be insignificant?
Well, we talked about the train scenario equivalent, right? That we can throw a ball across the carriage of a train to each other at 100 miles an hour, and we are unaware that we are moving, right? The ball behaves as though we are not moving.
Right, but that's not good
the same
enough.
deal for the pilot.
No, it's not at all the same deal. If you had a different tangential velocity that we were throwing the ball to each other over, if you were moving at 1,000 miles an hour and I was standing at 0 miles an hour on the plane, on this train, somehow you were at a different tangential velocity. It's a non sequitur.
Yeah.
It's not even comparable. We have a round surface. We have a ball surface and the spin, which is totally different than one linear direction inside a cabin of a train.
Yeah, okay. So what is the rate? What is the rate? If our train was going around in a big circle, right? How tight would the circle have to be before we can sense that as we threw the ball? That's the thing here. The rate of change is very small. We're not a projectile. The other forces acting on the plane, wind gusts, pilot, adjustment, moving around across the surface, way many orders of magnitude bigger than the 1 kilometre an hour per minute that he has to pick up from an external observer's point of view to be travelling with the Earth by the time he gets to the equator.
So is that like saying
the dynamics? Go ahead.
Is that like saying that the ball Earth is spinning really fast but really slow?
Relative,
it's the rate.
Relative to something else is really slow. Yeah, so you can just relatively think this makes sense, but you can just think about running trains and everything, and it makes it all work, right?
Its rate of turn is very slow.
Well, very slow compared to what?
Walk.
We're talking about a difference of 1,000 miles an hour, Dazza. What is the dynamic that makes the plane go in a separate vector sideways? Regardless, it adds up to 1,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, from an external observer's point of view, right? It's the same as being in the train or being in a plane, right? You can be in a plane doing 1,000 miles an hour and you're not aware of that motion, right?
It's not.
Because your environment is moving relative to the aircraft. His aircraft is moving relative to the Earth, right? He's not aware of any motion other than what he sees relative to the Earth and relative to the air.
Dude, if you were in a plane and you took off from 0 miles an hour, right? And by the time you landed, if your plane was going 1,000 miles an hour sideways and 400 miles per hour forward, you don't think that you would notice that you're going 1,000 miles an hour compared to 0 by the time you got there?
Compared to
You're just
what?
thinking of this as working because you're so convinced it's a globe. This doesn't work. 1,000 miles an hour sideways? What? That's little compared to what?
So what's
1,000 miles an
can
hour
we?
is 1,000 miles an hour. Just because you think of it as small doesn't make it small.
So what if you drove a car from the North Pole to the equator?
Yeah, it's one
That'd be a
reference
problem.
frame, right? You'd be on the Earth.
Why?
It'd be one reference frame, non sequitur.
Okay.
When you're in a plane, it's
When
a
does
non-inertial and inertial reference frame. So you have the Coriolis
no?
effect. You're not attached to the Earth any longer. That's a non sequitur.
Why does the pilots need a separate reference frame? He's physically attaching himself to the Earth by following a particular navigational path.
He doesn't
He
need
is
a separate
remaining
reference frame.
in
It
sync
just
with the
is.
Earth's reference frame.
It's not. He's not in sync. That's just the concept. You want to think of it as he's always in sync. He's not always in sync.
He's not a projectile. He hasn't been shot out of a cannon. He's in controlled flight following the ground. He's maintaining the same effective reference frame as the surface of the Earth.
My headphone cut out.
Just like a car, but he's attached to the wind, not to the ground.
Yeah, right. That would be nice. That'd be great. The wind? Which wind? The wind's going west, or the wind's going south, or the wind's going east? Which wind is he attached to?
The wind's going backwards and forward across the ground at 10 to 70 kilometers an hour relative to the ground. He's following those winds and that ground.
Yeah, but the winds are moving in all directions. So if the winds are pushing the planes in all directions, what's the wind that makes them go 1,000 miles an hour faster eastward?
So if you're a
Automatically,
pilot and you get a bit of a gust of wind,
without the
right?
pilot noticing a thing. Pilot's unaware of this whatsoever. He's moving 1,000 miles an
Absolutely.
hour sideways now. He's picking up 1,000 miles per hour eastward tangential velocity without the pilot having any idea that this is happening. Do you realize how
Exactly.
realize
Exactly.
how
Because he's looking at the ground, he's looking at the wind around him. Why would he know? What physical reason would he have to know that somebody from looking from outside the Earth would see him traveling at 1,000 miles an hour sideways?
It's
How
not
would he know?
about whether someone sees him. It's not about. It's about the actual
It
dynamics
is.
of how it
That
works.
is what the other reference frame you're discussing is. It's from somebody on the outside seeing the Earth moving.
It's an actual movement of the Earth. Why do you think about it in reference
Yeah.
frames only? It's the actual.
You don't see
claim
that
of
movement of
ball.
the Earth unless you're looking from the outside, right?
No, the claim of the ball is it's a difference of 1,000 miles an hour, bro. It's a literal.
Nobody's
claim.
denying that.
And they're only saying that because the sky is moving above and they need an explanation for it.
Exactly. It doesn't work, Dazza.
It does. It does.
It does if you think about it as reference frames and only mattering from the looking from space. But that doesn't make it work. You need to name the mechanism that the pilot's unaware of.
So
It accelerates his plane in a separate vector. What's the mechanism that pushes the plane?
it's him.
Him? No,
He's
he's
the
not trained to
mechanism.
do that. He's not trained to. He's
It
not
is.
trained to worry about the tangential velocity at all. If he was trained,
No,
if
he's
there
not.
was a
Yeah.
tangential velocity difference that he needed to worry about, that he needed to make sure the plane was in sync with, pilots would be trained to deal with that, just like they are with
How would he
aircraft.
know? How would he know there was a tangential velocity?
Well, because the Earth would be moving 1,000 miles per hour faster where he's landing than where he took off from.
How would he know that? What would he
Because the Earth would be
see?
moving faster, and he would have to make sure the plane's moving with the Earth. That there's no
What would he
mechanism to make
see?
the plane do
What
it
would
on
his
its own.
instrument show? What would his instrument show?
Well, that's the thing. There's no instruments to show that,
Because
right?
they don't show
You're
anything,
saying,
right?
but you're
Because he's
saying,
moving with the Earth.
but you're saying that the pilot would have
Everything
to
around him is
incrementally.
moving with the Earth. The air
But
is
you
the.
understand? You made two different statements. You said he would incrementally have to make up for this. The pilot would be doing it, but then he'd be unaware of it at the same time. Do you realize?
That's it.
How it
Yeah.
goes?
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't
Yeah.
work.
You know, say
Pilot
he's
would be
flying
aware
along,
of
right?
everything that the plane's doing. The pilot would be made aware of every movement. If the pilot was going to if the pilot was going to fly from the North Pole to the equator and land, and literally the plane would be moving at 1,000 miles an hour faster sideways. You think that wouldn't be in the manual somewhere to let the pilot know? Well, there might be a problem here because you're moving now at 1,000 miles an hour faster sideways.
Yeah.
No,
And
no,
no matter
So
what the ground path tells you, what's keeping him up? Even if there was a mechanism you can name, which you haven't, even if you could name the mechanism or somehow this works with the ground path, what's keeping the plane moving sideways as it's landing in a perpendicular direction? What's the force that's keeping the plane tangentially in sync with the Earth?
It's just
Well,
the
hold
relative
on.
velocity, right?
Isn't the plane like wawing to the left or something?
If it yaws to the left, it needs to know why it's doing
Yeah, bitch, yeah.
it.
So this is no different to flying a drone around inside the plane itself, right? So if you've got a drone and you're in an aircraft and it takes off, you get up to cruising speed, or even before you get to cruising speed, you fly your drone in the aircraft. You can fly it up and down, up and down. You don't have to make any corrections for what's going on in the aircraft unless it turns really sharply, right?
We already went over
So
this.
it can slow down, it can speed up, it can go into a bank. You could just fly your drone around as though you were motionless.
Yeah,
You
you don't
wouldn't be
have the
able to
different
tell.
tangential velocities to deal with on the inside of a cabin of an airplane. We already went through this. It's not
No,
sequitur.
you do. The
Oh, you do?
aircraft is moving relative to the Earth at different speeds, right?
No,
But you don't
I'm
know it
talking about
because everything
inside.
around you is together.
No, it's no. You really want to try to make that your argument? Inside the plane, the drone's going to land on another area inside the plane that's at a different velocity, tangential velocity than where it took off from. That's not the
It doesn't
same
matter
as
whether
on
it's
a ball Earth.
tangential or what. The aircraft could be accelerating. It could be, so we could take our drone off and the plane's
Well, I'm not
doing
saying.
100 miles an hour. We could be flying around unaware of that. And before we know it, we could be doing 1,000 miles an hour in the aircraft, right? Our drone will just fly around the aircraft like we're not moving.
For it to not be a non sequitur, there would have to be different parts of the plane moving at different speeds, the way the Earth is said to. If it was a big ball in the air that you're flying in, that was spinning, and you're having to land the drone on the inside of a spinning ball with different tangential velocities to account for, then it would be closer to what we're talking about.
But at any given time, right, the pilot doesn't see a big change in tangential velocity. It's 1 mile an hour every minute, right? That's on average. That's how much he would have to do if he was flying due south, right?
Yeah, but
He's
that's
not
just
even
your way
going to
of
notice that.
minimizing it. You're thinking of it as one that's
No, that's
small
exact. It's not
incrementally.
minimizing
That
it.
doesn't mean it
That's the
doesn't add up
value.
to 1,000. It still adds up to 1,000, Dazza. Still adds up to 1,000. And if it's
It
incremental, then
does.
the pilot would be aware that he's making the incremental changes for those reasons. It still adds up. You can't just think of it as small. It's just like it's 2015 flat Earth arguments where you're like, well, you don't feel it on a plane. Well, a drone on a plane would be similar. It's not, bro. It's not the same. You have You have
Okay.
dynamics to explain different tangential velocities. Doesn't matter if you think about 1,000 miles an hour is slow. 1,000 miles an
All
hour is
right.
still 1,000 miles an hour compared to zero where you started from.
And I must admit that I did promise you I was going to do the dynamics. I was going to write up the dynamics and give you a thing. So I'll do that and
You
give
name
you a
the force.
dynamic explanation, and we
What's
can
the
go through
force?
that.
You're going to have to call it a wind. I don't know why you would even have to
No,
put anything on paper.
the pilot is applying the force to the aircraft to get to where he wants to go, right?
It doesn't work with the ground
That
path.
is the force, right?
That's not the force. It's not the force because their pilots aren't taught to keep up with the spin of the Earth. In fact, all the ground paths would be completely different. If you want to talk about ground path, we could talk about ground path. It would be so much longer if the Earth were spinning because the destination that he's flying towards, would be moving faster than where he's flying from. So that would make all of the flight paths different than they show it. They show it as a straight line right across the equator, which would be impossible. You would have to be flying to catch up to the city because it's moving at 1,000 miles an hour when you start off, just like the racetrack, right? Your whole flight path would be different if it was a spinning ball.
So you're talking about flying
Twice
along
as
the
long.
equator now?
You wouldn't be able to cruise at 400 miles an hour and get there. That's for sure. You'd have to be booking ass to even reach your destination, much less keep up with the tangential velocity.
So you're talking about the equator here now.
I'm talking about if
So
the city you're flying towards is moving at 1,000 miles an hour, when you start off at 0 miles an hour, that means you have to make up the difference, and your ground path would be leading the target, right? You understand that? You can't just have a straight path to 1,000 mile an hour tangential velocity because the city's moving faster than you are eastward. So it would change everything about your ground path.
So would that same logic apply if the two cities were on the equator and I was flying between them?
No, it wouldn't apply as much. No, because you would.
Why?
It would be a straight line. It would
Why?
be conceptually moving at the same speed.
So I take off at the equator and I've got 1,000 miles an hour, but I don't know it. Is that right?
That's the globe claim. That's
Like taking
ridiculous.
off.
That's the globe
So
claim.
we're going back to our. So on the equator, we're not rotating, right? So we're chasing a city on the equator. That's a good example, right? That's exactly the same as flying up and down in a plane with our drone, right? That we
You could think of
we've
it
got to
like
fly
that.
from one end of the aircraft to the other, and the aircraft's doing 1,000 miles an hour. It's easy, right?
But see, this is where it's like the kinematic concept of just the idea that the plane is taking off on the equator, and we're just thinking of the fact that he's automatically moving eastward because he was on the ground at 1,000 miles an hour. So yeah, we're just cruising. We're just reaching our cruising speed of 400. Meanwhile, this whole time we've been going 1,000 miles an hour since we took off eastward,
Yeah.
sideways. Think about how ridiculous that is. Come on, bro. Think
Yeah.
about it.
Well, you said you knew about reference frames and things before, so you need to look at the velocity and the accelerations in those reference frames, right? So the velocity and the momentums in those reference frames, and you can see that if you're attached to the Earth and you take off, you're still in the Earth's reference frame, right? You haven't been launched inertially. You're attached to the Earth and the air and everything moving
No,
with
you're
it.
not. You're not
Just
attached
like
to the
you're in an
Earth in the air.
aeroplane,
Nope,
right?
nope, nope, nope. You're not attached to the Earth in
Okay.
the air. Nope, nope.
So
There's a separate
if
reference.
I'm flying my drone up
You're in
and
a
down an
separate reference
aeroplane
frame.
that's doing 1,000 miles
Inertial.
an hour, what's the reference
There's
frame that I have to use?
an inertial and a non-inertial reference frame. That's why they have to claim there's a Coriolis effect. There would be on any kind of ball surface that's spinning. There's an inertial and a non-inertial reference. It's not the same
There
reference.
is. But the aircraft is not traveling inertially. It is traveling under its own power. It is following a specific path across the ground.
Not
It is
always.
not an inertial projectile.
No, there's lots of difference. It makes it worse for you. It doesn't matter because it's not a projectile, right? It could just fly straight.
It does,
Fly
because if
directly.
it's not a projectile, there is no inertial reference frame to consider.
No, it's not about that, dude. Just because it has engines doesn't make it in the same reference frame as the Earth.
It is, because it's keeping itself attached to the Earth.
It's not keeping
Velocity
itself
wise,
attached.
it's maintaining its own speed relative to the Earth's reference frame.
No, it's doing whatever it wants. It's not doing anything with the reference frame of the Earth. It's in a separate reference frame, bro. Can't just think of it as the same reference frame and then have it be in a separate one.
Well, you can. If you want to consider the two reference frames, you can attach one to the aircraft, you can attach one to the ground. The difference between the two reference frames will be wind, the wind speed across the ground, basically.
Right, in every direction, right? Winds go in all directions. So you're saying when there's no wind, that's what's moving the plane with the Earth?
That's it. If there's no wind relative to the ground, the aircraft is effectively attached to the Earth's reference frame.
It's attached by the no wind.
If it's moving in its own speed along the ground. So if there's no difference between the aircraft's reference frame motion and the motion of the Earth's reference frame, they are equivalent. And that is what is happening, right? We've got two equivalent reference frames. The aircraft is maintaining one by powered flight, and the Earth has the other one. And those reference frames are in sync, so they're effectively identical.
Right, but we already agreed it wouldn't be in sync anyway because of fluid dynamics. But regardless, even if it was
No, fluid dynamics is what is making them easy to stay in sync. Fluid dynamics is dragging the air with the Earth, right?
But you realize how ridiculous it is that you're saying that because when there's no wind, that's what's making it attached to the Earth and moving along with the Earth, because it's when there's no wind that it's in sync with the Earth, and somehow there's a force involved with this no wind keeping the plane moving sideways without the pilot's awareness of it. I mean, think about it, bro.
Well, you're kind of right that if there's no wind, that's a bit of an artificial situation, because there's always going to be wind shear, right? Because of the fluid dynamics that you'll get a wind shear from the ground to the top. You have to drag the wind somehow, right? But you could get a situation where the air is moving en masse with the Earth. But yeah, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. I'm going to stop.
Well, yeah. Let me just ask you this, Dazza. What would be the difference in training a pilot to fly over a stationary level Earth as opposed to training a pilot to fly over a spinning ball Earth? What would be the difference?
All right, let me get in next after he answers that.
Let Dazza answer, Dazza, before you go.
Yeah, I'm next. I'm gonna go next. Yeah.
How would you train a pilot differently if you were training him to fly over a spinning ball Earth as opposed to a stationary level Earth?
How fast is he traveling?
No, I'm asking if there would be any difference in how you would train a pilot for those two situations.
No, there'll be no difference if the Earth, if you're spinning, adds one revolution per day. Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's how you have to think of it. That's just the kinematic concept that it all cancels out because you're thinking of it as the same. But you realize there'd be so many different dynamical differences that statement right there that you made you're going to look back on someday if you really want to be honest with yourself and go, that's ridiculous. Of course it'd be different.